Healing Minds and Souls, a faith-based community dedicated to bringing trauma-informed care to the North Nashville community and surrounding areas through education, resources, and building relationships to develop healthy and a holistic community. Pastor Ella Clay will be talking about how we can stop allowing fear to overtake us regardless of our past, present, or future. Come and learn how to recognize signs and symptoms of trauma as we understand the emotional, physical, social, and spiritual impact of traumas. We will unpack the meanings of vicarious traumas and how to avoid moral injury as we actively avoid re-traumatizing ourselves and others. Let's learn together how to navigate life challenges of grief, trauma, pain, and/or isolation, and discover our innate strengths of courage, kindness, trust, perseverance, and become better equipped to experience a newfound confidence by not letting circumstances define our current existence or future selves. Join our show today with Pastor Ella Clay. She serves as senior pastor of the historic First Community Church and executive director of Healing Minds and Souls, 1815, Knoll Street, Nashville, Tennessee, 37208.
Good morning. Welcome to Healing Minds and Souls. We are so thankful on today that God is the lifter of our head. He is our shield. He is our glory and the lifter of our heads. And we can trust in the Lord with all of our heart and lean not into our own understanding. And in every way, we can acknowledge God and He directs our path. Thank you for joining us on this morning. And after we hear from our sponsors, we'll be right back.
Are you looking to watch some of your favorite family TV shows like The Dick Van Dyke?
The Dick Van Dyke Show. Starring Dick Van Dyke.
Lucy.
The Lucy Show.
The Cosby Show and more? Look no more. With our service, you can instantly access hundreds of classic family TV shows. Plus, you can watch them anytime and anywhere.
The internationally renowned Alvin Ailey American Dance Theater returns to Tennessee Performing Arts Center to premiere bold new works and perform beloved audience favorites, including Ailey's iconic masterpiece, Revelations. Experience 65 years of groundbreaking artistry when America's ambassador of modern dance returns to Nashville. Experience the magic of Alvin Ailey April 26 through 28. Get your tickets today at tpac.org.
Join host Dr. William Head each Thursday live at 4:30 p.m. Central Standard Time. The show is Let's Talk About It, chats with experts on their field, issues that affect everyone, and interviews with people who have found success in life. Are you looking for a way to successfully advertise your business or ministry? Look no further than North Nashville's online TV station. Our platform gives you the opportunity to showcase your business or ministry to a wide range of viewers. With our advertising service, you get access to creative professionals who can help spread your message and reach potential customers in a cost-effective manner. We understand the importance of creating an impactful advertisement, and we are committed to helping you achieve your goals.
This morning we have Ms. Kia Jarman, who works at the intersections of community, culture, crises, and communication, guiding leaders and organizations and systems on the pathway of improvement. Over the past 16 years, central to Jarman's work, she is studying and sharing how people are impacted by leadership decisions. In her everyday role, Jarman wears many, many hats. She leads the Boutique Communications and Community Engagement Media Public Relations Agency. And she's also the founder and visionary for the nonprofit Equity Collaborative and serves as a philanthropy advisor of Give Black and Give Back, the first effort of the Black Philanthropy Initiative in Middle Tennessee. Through the lens of capacity and equity and inclusion, Jarman partners with high-capacity leaders in nonprofit, government, and the C-suite on mission-driven, high-impact initiatives to drive organizations, community, and system changes. Specifically, Kia has led and partnered on the city and statewide efforts to address industries that are historically underdeveloped in minority communities like affordable housing, water conservation, foods insecurity, transit, health access, mental health, youth violence, child abuse prevention, elder law, historic preservation, and green space, to list a few. My goodness, I am so very, very excited to have this amazing, innovative, powerful, and beautiful, highly intelligent young woman here on Healing Minds and Souls on today. We welcome you.
Thank you so much for having me. It's an honor to sit here. I've been watching your show and so grateful to be a guest and sit alongside of you.
Thank you again. And certainly appreciate all the work that you have done and what you continue to do. And I'm amazed. Actually, I am just really fascinated how you continue to do work on so many, many levels. You have a very diverse way of serving. And so the creativity, the innovation, how you have your hands in so many things. How do you have time to do that?
Yes, well, through and through, I'm a born entrepreneur.
Okay.
So as an entrepreneur, I'm a risk taker, I'm an innovator, I'm a disruptor, I'm a question asker, I'm a storyteller. I'm very much so interested in lots of different things, but at the core of my life, it's humanity, right? Caring about other people. And I really think about, I was thinking about our conversation today and thinking about my family, and the foundation of my family are teachers, pastors, entrepreneurs. All of them, the thread is people, serving people, making sure people are well. And so that's what I've spent my time doing. Between that and then being a 35-year member of Girl Scouts. Those things ground me in serving other people. As a matter of fact, from a very young age, you're saying, I promise to do the best by myself and my community. I mean, you say that and you don't know quite what it means, but they're they're ingraining that, and then you begin living it out. And so when people call me for all these different amazing projects and they see the talent and the gift, I'm just grateful that they see me.
Well, you have certainly held allegiance to that Girl Scout, saying that I will be loyal, I will serve my community,
Absolutely.
I will be the person ultimately that God has created you to be. And so with that, could you share a little bit about your journey, what has brought you here? And also, what would you share to other young women that are still trying to find who they are and who God has created them to be and becoming, right? Because we are still becoming
always.
every day.
Yes.
So what would you share? Could you just lift those two things up
Yes.
for our audience?
So in terms of my journey, again, born entrepreneur, from a very young age, I learned the value of risk taking. So my first kind of entrepreneurial story is being at the Boys and Girls Club local here in Nashville and selling jewelry. And they called my parents one day and said, you have to tell her to stop because she's taking their lunch money. And so I realized at that moment, I got something here, you know. I was like, okay, just don't get caught, you know. So this is the risk taker in me at in second grade, learning that one, I have a product that people want to use, but also that someone else noticed, someone in power and leadership noticed this. Now, as a child, I'm not putting all of this together, but as I've grown, I'm thinking, wow, that's a really impactful thing to have that level of influence where someone says, please tell her to stop. So as I go through life, as I go through being a Girl Scout, my parents always had me involved in creative outlets, particularly music. I went to and graduated from National School of the Arts as a music major, so I was a vocalist there, and you get formal classical music training.
Oh my God, I didn't know that you were a singer as well.
Yes.
Oh, I have to invite you back to do some other things.
Okay, we shall see. But I also realized in that, in playing the piano and then began working through composition as well, started that process, I learned I really enjoy behind the scenes. I really want to be, I enjoy being in front. Certainly, I've been professionally speaking for a long time, since I was about 13 or 14 for Girl Scouts, and then went on to do it for my own business. But I realized I am much better at pushing other people's story and pushing other people's things. I went to and graduated from Belmont University. I'm the first Ingram Scholar that attended there. My degree is in music business, the business emphasis. So all of these things are shaping. I'm sharing the accolades, but it's really the time I spent in those places that really shaped who I am. It's the friends, it's the relationships I built. It's learning what I loved, it's learning what I didn't love. Which I believe is also, if I'm interweaving advice to young people, it's also doing as much as you can do to learn what you don't like. As a mother now, my son is like, oh, I've got to do another sport or another theater program or another. Yes, we're going to do all of it. So you can determine what you don't like as much as what you do like. And so I've spent time learning that is not my calling. Oh, this is my calling. Oh, this is my space. What I learned from a young age, as I kind of matriculated through life, was my calling at that time was to serve other people. As a matter of fact, there's an article in the Tennessean from like 2002 where it says that exact line about me. And I remember when years later my dad showed me the article, you know, your parents give you a gut check, right? And I read it and I said, oh my gosh, how did I know back then what my calling was? I believe the calling is foundationally still there. It has evolved, though, to model what people can see. So I've designed a beautiful life so that people can see a reflection of that.
I love how you say you designed a beautiful life.
Yes.
Because oftentimes some individuals feel that society or their families or their friends
Absolutely.
are the guiding force. But you just say so much to me.
I mean, you know, listen, as an entrepreneur, I always say I can hear God the best.
Yeah.
Right? I've been an employee before and it gets real muffled. That doesn't mean that God is muffled. It means that how I'm listening is muffled, right? And so the voice feels more distant.
Yeah.
But when you're by yourself and you only have you to manage and you only have your own thing to do, man, oh man, you can hear God's voice in a big way. And so together we designed. What's interesting is, as a child, my dad would say he and God designed and crafted and blueprinted this thing, right, for my life. And I'm very honest, that's true, right? Because that's what your parents do. As I grew and as I got older, I began to realize, again, like and don't like. And I realized I wanted my people, particularly Black people, but also young people, young women, to see a reflection of what they could be. And so I've spent a long time doing a couple of things to do that. Like I travel quite a bit, so I spend a lot of time setting a lot of boundaries around my life so that I can travel. I want my son to see me living. When we talk about building a legacy, right, we often talk about the legacy after a person has lived. The legacy is lived, right? So you have to live that thing out while you're here. I don't want people saying all these amazing things about me after I'm gone. I want you to say amazing things about me while I'm here. But mostly I want you to see what you can be in my life. And that's my advice and also my pathway for young people is do everything, learn all the things. And then also you're not a tree. You can move. You don't like something, we don't have to live the same way we've lived or our parents or grandparents lived. You don't have to stay in a situation, whatever that is, relationship, job, anything that you don't get inspired by, that you're not loved in, that you don't find joy in. As traumatic as the world is, I have to also find absolute radical joy for my life. It's important.
I tell you, you are so wise, far beyond your years, Miss Kia.
Thank you.
Yes, you are.
I always say thank you. I like to look young, but I do have a little wisdom behind it.
You have a lot of wisdom,
so
not a little, but a
for
lot.
that. Thank you.
A lot.
Thank you.
So you speak about how your work intersects with community,
Yes.
with culture crisis, and guiding leaders. Can you share about that? And you do so much, and we want to talk too about what you do, and then probably
okay.
go on. Maybe we have to do a part 2 or
Okay,
3
perfect.
because you're
I
doing
love
so
it.
much.
I'm excited.
But can you share about that? How your work it intersects?
Yeah, I began to try to find the foundation of, what is it that I do, right? Because I do so many things and I want to direct people to know, well, how do I use her skills? How do I use her talents? And so the intersection of community, culture, crisis, and communication came about and supporting leaders in that. So let's just start at community. That's the core. People are the core of all the work. When I work with organizations, I'm like, we don't have to worry about your profits. We don't have to worry about your policies. Let's talk about the people first. And then all that will shift and shape itself the way it's supposed to. We can maneuver that. So community, let's think about it this way. Let's think about it relative to crisis. We are in crisis, okay? Whether we're talking about the Black community, whether we're talking about the young community, whether we're talking about the faith community, we can go on and on. It intersects all types of industries and people and places and races and generationally, all of that. And so there is a crisis. My requirement for life is that we acknowledge the crisis is happening. Because as James Baldwin would say, past is present. We very much so think about things as what happened back then. I'm like, what's happening right now too, right? We just have different platforms. We have social media, or we have, great opportunities like this. We have podcasts. We have other ways and mediums to hear about it. But we're dealing with the same trauma from the past, right? The conversation has evolved some, but it's also, we're still having some of the same conversations. I do a lot of work around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism. We're still having the same conversation that was happening before the 1964 legislation around civil rights, right? So if we're still having that, then we have to acknowledge it. So I spend a lot of time in the historical context, making sure that we're mindful of what people are experiencing, so that we can then say, how do we put a disruption in the cycle, right? You only know how to disrupt if you know what the issue is. Very often people want to come in with solutions, right? People are solutionists. I want to come in and solve a problem. Okay, tell me what the problem is. And they begin to tell me about a surface problem, and I say, well, why is that? So we'll use the example of food insecurity, which I know we'll talk about at some point. At the surface, we think, well, those children are just obese. Okay, but that's a very surface response to an environmental and communal and systemic issue. We can't just look at it and say that child is obese and it's their fault. No, I want to look at the root cause of this. So we can go back lots of places, but in this country, I start us at American chattel slavery. What were we eating? We're eating scraps, right? And how ingenious you have to be as a Black person to be able to take the scraps, the parts of all of the animal and all the things that are the most disgusting, and then make them something. So what do you use? You have to oversalt. You have to herb it. You have to overdo it. Why? So then now we're still operating that way, because it's come through our DNA that we know to oversalt our food, to overfry our food. Why? Because we're used to having scraps. Do I think that we've evolved? Absolutely. But I'm just saying, it's in your DNA. It sits in the core of who you are. And so that's a crisis. Well, so I can't just look at that young person and say you're obese. I have to say what happened in the background that no one else is looking at. What's the root of that tree, not just the tree itself? So then we move into the cultural aspect, which I've also just infused there. But the other part of the cultural aspect is making sure that we infuse not just the trauma, which is the crisis part, but the joy. I have a friend, Bridget Jones, who has an exhibit down at the Frisk Museum called Black Joy in Spite of. And that is exactly who we are as people, in spite of hatred, disrespect, all of these things. We still rise, we still do well. And so I also want to make sure we bring in and infuse usually art. So whether that's eating really well, whether that's martial arts, whether that is doing yoga, or whether it's doing visual arts, or whether it's vocal art, whatever it looks like, is how do we bring in and infuse our culture into that work as well? And making sure that we have access to all of the experiences that we have either created or we've been instrumental in some way. Right? So like we're seeing that now with Beyonce. There's an argument about her doing country music. Well, because I do a lot of training, I train music executives, particularly country music executives, about the foundation of Black people in country music.
Awesome.
And so she's not new, she's not a new person. She's a more popular person. She's a more mainstream person. And she's evolved from what we know to be R&B to being in country, but that is her music. She's allowed to do that. So bringing in that culture, and then of course communicating it really well, storytelling. This is a good example of that communication, of sitting here talking today. Very much so, our stories don't get memorialized in the way that they should be. And so my excitement about even being with you is saying my story gets memorialized, right? For the future, so that people can look back. Because we know what happens. People will revise the history. And what they'll say is, oh, there were happy slaves. okay? That's a revision of history.
Not understanding that we had to find
This
joy.
is an adaptation.
We were not going to allow that to
Yes,
overtake us and succumb to the
absolutely.
pain and to the...
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So that's the revision, right? That's the historical perspective of who could write it. So who could write it, who could take it to print, they get to revise the story. But when we document it and we put it in writing, or we put it in oral, or we put it in video, then somebody gets a chance to come back and say, no, let me tell the story. And I'm just coming back from South Africa, and I got a chance to hike
What
up.
part did you?
Started in Cape Town, went to Durban, went to Drakensberg, went to Johannesburg, and then we went to Zimbabwe and
Oh
came back
my
to
goodness.
So
How long was your trip?
about 2.5 weeks, and we moved like every 3 days.
Oh, my goodness.
we were like moving, but it was amazing.
We're on our way to Cape Town, so we have to talk.
Ooh, we have to talk.
Yes,
We have to
let's
talk. So when we were in Drakensberg, which is about 3 hours outside of Durban, we were going up to, we had to hike up about 1.5 miles to a cave where the Khoisan people lived and operated. And the bush people is what they would be called, thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago. And when you look up on the rocks, they're telling stories. They're printed stories. They would make ink out of all of these different things, whether it be ostrich eggs, or it was all of these different materials they were using. We are storytellers, and someone has to be responsible for making sure that those stories don't go away.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
How has that trip changed you, or did it change you, or how did you, I'm sure you went as one person. Were you impacted so that you feel that you have experienced a different type of life or a different type of knowledge, or even being with the natives? How has has it impacted you?
Yeah, I travel quite a bit with what I call my old lady gang, which is my mom and her kind of retired friends, and I really enjoy it. Yeah.
Beautiful.
And every trip, it takes me a while to decompress. What I can say without a full decompression, because I'm still operating in it, is it very much so felt like being in America in a lot of ways. And part of that is because the segregation feels very similar. The gentrification feels very similar. South Africa, when we were learning the origin of the Dutch people coming over and taking over these spaces, the Portuguese people coming over and taking over these spaces, and then you begin to see black, white, colored, you begin to see how the distinction and how people are treated. We had an opportunity to go to Robben Island, which is where Nelson Mandela was housed for about 18 or so of his years imprisoned. And we also got a chance to go to another prison, Constitution Hill, as well. And in those two prisons, how you ate was distinguished based on your racial makeup. And so that still feels similar to what's happening currently, and that wasn't so far long ago.
No, not at all.
That he was in prison, or even before they closed these prisons down. I believe the last I'm gonna probably get it wrong, but the early 1990s, I believe, was the last prisoners that left Robben Island. That's not that long ago when you think about who has power there. Who was, who's in prison as political prisoners, but also they may have done other things as well to get imprisoned, and then who the prison guards are, who the wardens are, white versus black or colored. And so it still very much so felt like it was a struggle, because you're talking about the most rich continent in the world.
Yeah.
Right? You're talking about platinum, diamonds, gold. That's what they mine across this continent, but also in this area, particularly in South Africa. And you think, why don't our people own the farms? The farm land is owned by white people. They're owned by Europeans. And the shanties, and when you get there, you'll see the shanties that are small, you can't even call them tiny homes. So here we may popularize it as tiny homes, but it's literally an aluminum building. And building is generous. It's probably enough space maybe for the two of us to do what we're doing now, which is to sit. And that's the government housing. And then they're stacked and they're pushed together so that you now have, your whole family may be living side by side, but you're essentially living with no electricity. Your electricity may be outside. of the space, or you might have electricity for a certain amount of time, but not all day. They do a lot of load shedding, so they cut the lights off for certain periods of time. Your restroom is outside of your home, you know, those type of things. So you see how rich of a place it is. And then you also, but here's what I will say, because I always got to end on joy. One thing about Black folks, I don't care what continent I've been on. One, we are beautiful people.
Absolutely.
We are genius people.
Absolutely.
So going to the markets and watching the women do the things that they were doing, whether it was braiding hair, whether it was the manicure, pedicure station, whether it was the clothing store, whether it was making crafts, whatever it was so beautiful to see our people do what I know we know how to do, which is be amazing in spite of
just
what the conditions
innovative,
are.
being extremely
Absolutely.
innovative. It's something really interesting about colonization and even the mindset of humanity's people thinking that they have the power to colonize, not understanding that the earth is the Lord and the fullness thereof, and those that dwell therein. So meaning that everyone, right, we should have that power. And that's another topic for another day. Okay. We'll get to that.
I'm excited about that.
So you mentioned about crises. You said you do a lot of work in crises, and you said something important, that we are in a crisis state now, I mean worldwide. And so I want to talk about the crises of trauma. I have had to do 2 funerals for 2 beautiful, smart, intelligent, and amazing African men within 6 months period. Okay, same family. And so it impacts our community, it impacts families, it impacts us in an adverse manner. And so you think of the pain, you think of the trauma that individuals have to go through, and just doing the best that they can. And I called it, actually, I heard in my spirit the other day that we're in a pandemic of trauma. Right.
Yeah.
And so no one seems to, I mean, some people are, but I think worldwide we don't know what to do. We don't know how to handle it. We see the suicide rate continues to increase.
Absolutely.
And seemingly, as we look in the natural, people have more now than they ever have had. So it's not about things,
Yes,
right?
right.
So it's about our soul, it's about our spirit, it's about what we're dealing with, things that we can't even give voice to.
That's right.
Can you share your thoughts on the crises, and I'll call it again the pandemic of trauma?
Absolutely. Whew. So you have to take a big sigh after you hear that, right? Because it's so true that we are, so one, there's the transmission of trauma through epigenetics, right? It's how our DNA, how our genes change and transform based on the environment, the situation that we're in, which is how you end up thinking. There's an example that a doctor shared with me about how we hold water in our body. And so people take a water pill to release that water. Wonder why that is. He said, well, let's think about being on a ship where you've been stolen from your country and you have to come over here and you only can drink water one time, maybe for a whole month. So you got to hold water. Okay, I'm just giving an example, and this is the example that the gentleman gave me. And I said, oh, okay, that makes so much sense. So we hold the trauma of past generations. It's actually called intergenerational transmission of trauma, right? So we're holding, and so it's sometimes we're angry, and we don't know why we're angry. Like, it's a great day, the sun is shining, and the birds are chirping. Why am I angry? And we don't know why. Now, granted, it might be our immediate condition, but that has been compounded by something else that we can't figure out. This is how I know that a lot of the trauma of the world, from all races and generations of people, comes from all different places, but of course it comes from your people. It comes from your background, your genetic makeup. So that's one piece. The other piece is that we have not reckoned with being in a health pandemic. And so when you come out of health pandemics, or any type of pandemic, but let's just use COVID-19 as an example, when you come out of that and people are sick, people are dying, people are still experiencing the impacts of having long COVID and all of these things. And then we all just get up and go to work, and we all just get up and come back into buildings, and we all get up and so you're confused about how, are we not going to address what just happened? It's I would imagine it's like a domestic violent experience. Someone hits you and then never talks to you about what happened. And I'm not saying that they should be given the ability to to be taught. And I'm not saying that there should be this very cavalier experience, but what I'm saying is it's the smack, and then I don't have a clue what happened to get the smack to happen. Not that I'm to be blamed, but just did I prompt it? Was there a conversation that could have been happening? I mean, so you start to make up stuff. Oh, I did something. Oh, I'm not living well. Oh, I was disrespectful. That's the actual confusion of living in this world where we're not addressing the things. So when you go through the pandemic and we haven't addressed that, then that's what happens. And then we have smaller, epidemics. Youth violence is an epidemic, and I wish we would say that. I've actually asked, in a cave full of nobody, council and our mayors to say this is an epidemic, this is an issue. Because there's a West African proverb that says, how are the children doing? And if the children are not well, then the society can never be well. The way in which we actually should find out if our community is well is based on the children. What are the outcomes of our children? And so we have all of these things that are popping up that we have not addressed. So we haven't addressed the actual long-term makeup intergenerationally that's happening to us. We're not addressing current time trauma that's happening to us. And we're not addressing our most valuable community members, our youth, in this conversation. We actually don't care about children. We've made that very clear, that we don't care about our children in the long run. And then when they
how have we made that clear?
I believe we made it clear by lack of legislation. I think we made it clear by the current banning of books or opportunities for our children to learn about history and historical perspective and be able to shape their
appropriation.
Absolutely. So where you put your money is a moral agenda.
That's
right.
correct.
So where you put them, that's the reality of power. Where you put your resources, your money, shows what you care about and what you don't care about. We certainly don't care about Black children because through something called adultification, which is how we see our children as the inability for them to make mistakes, for them to be seen as older. So we've also killed our children. Society has killed our children because, they look like an adult and they were 5 or 6, right? Like, how can your vision be so skewed in such a way where you see our children? So this is why, for me, as a parent of a 9-year-old son, I am like, I don't care if you call it a helicopter, hawk, whatever I am to guard his life, because society has shown me that we're very flippant about our children, and in particular about our Black children.
Oh my goodness, Kia.
Yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
so much loaded information. And so we talked about the pandemic and how we are still, I don't even know if we're out of it.
No, people are still, it's actually, COVID's probably going to be here, right? It's like the flu at this point, or a cold. It will be here. And the flippancy that we have around people just kind of getting over it is really concerning. Certainly not everyone is doing that. I know that. But the amount of people who push to get back into schools and into buildings and workplaces, that lets me know that if this happens, what will be next? Because again, life is cyclical.
Yeah.
And so we will experience another thing again. And so it's a matter of who's going to advocate for us to be well and to take time to heal. Part of this is that we have physical healing, so we've got to go through the physical. There's a social healing that has to happen too, right? Communally, we keep getting these ridges and rips in our foundation. And if I rip a blanket long enough, it's shredded.
Oh my goodness.
If I rip it long enough, it becomes shredded, and that's what what's happening to our community. We have all these tears, and we're trying to sew it together, but eventually, and I'm not saying that it's not a great tapestry, but I'm saying it is some hurt, it's some bumps, it's some bruises, it's some discomfort in there, some disrespect, it's some dishonor, and we have to find ways to make a new blanket, right? We can't just keep the tattered one. We have to see if society will allow us, particularly as Black folks, to have a new blanket. Can we have new foundation? Wow. Can we have new foundation so that our children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren have a place that feels like it's theirs too? Not just that they exist in it, but they actually can be responsible in it.
That imagery was just so powerful, what you just stated. And so I think about you being a visionary, and so we don't even know, again, what the results of COVID is going to look like. And so again, we're just going from day to day. what are your thoughts, and you kind of touched on it, but what are your thoughts as to the repercussions from it? So we know there's an emotional, we know that there's a social impact, certainly a spiritual impact, and also I think a mental impact from it that we don't even know that may be coming. We hadn't even planned for it, nothing is in place. What do you think that looks like? Someone said that does healthcare said that it was going to be a crisis of AIDS because as an effect of COVID.
Interesting. Okay. Okay.
So we don't know what the impact will be. So what are some things that you think that we could do to start preparing ourselves, or do you have any thoughts? If you have any thoughts.
Yeah. So during the pandemic, I spent some time working in youth development, so positive youth development, really supporting young people in their dreams and what they could be in the world. And I also spent time with practitioners who work with young people about the grim nature of our young people. Whether it is suicide or suicidal ideations are increasing, depression is increasing, isolation is increasing. One of the outcomes, I believe, of COVID will be a distrust, one, of society from our young people. We see that now. Many of them are advocating for big things, environmental justice, and some of those big things. But also, I believe they will be more, I've used this word before already in the conversation, but flippant about what happens to them. We're seeing that happen. They just, whatever happens, happens to me. If I'm meant to be here, I'm meant to be here. If I'm not, I'm not. We're very much so seeing young people have that attitude. On the flip side, however, we're seeing young people who are more impassioned about building a life that will change and transform their family. So I'm seeing both, right? I'm seeing young people who absolutely, what happens, happens. And on the other side, certainly seeing young people who are saying, I've got to be where the chain breaks.
Yes.
And so I believe both of those things will happen. I believe, so you asked about like the solution for that. I don't have all the solutions. I have maybe thoughts, but I also maybe have questions, because I lead my life by asking questions, because sometimes the answer is not always immediately available to us. And so one of my questions, as I've already mentioned, is how are the children? So the recourse of this will be, are the children well? If the children are not well, then we will have challenges as a society, because children become adults.
Yes.
As a matter of fact, I was talking to an executive of a very large organization, because through my work with these young people, and I shared with him, I said, I want you to remember that the young people that you're working with and employing now will one day be your employer. And it took his breath away, because he said, I wasn't prepared for that response. But I was explaining to him, the world that you gift us is the world they will make for you.
Wow.
And that is what we're actually experiencing currently. The world that we have is a reflection of what we've been given. Whatever violence we see is because that's what we've been given. Whatever distrust is because that's what we've been given. Also, whatever joy is whatever we've been given. And so we have to be mindful of that for the future. Whatever we're given, our children are going to give it back to us. And it's going to manifest into something that either we're going to be proud of and excited, or it's going to be something that we're going to continue to go down with. And that's the question for me, is how are the children doing, and how can I leave something for them that they can do something well with? If I can just guide by those two questions, I don't have to solve all the problems. I just have to get to the shorter bridge and keep crossing that short bridge and do a little bit more, and cross another short bridge and do a little bit more towards answering that particular question.
And we certainly want to be proud of our youth. And certainly they are very highly intelligent.
Absolutely.
I mean, very skillful, technologically savvy.
Absolutely.
So I believe that's another thing too, that they have a lot of answers. And for us to be better,
Yeah.
we need to start going to our youth
you're
and
saying
asking them their thoughts as
Absolutely.
it relates to society. They have, I'm sure, some thoughts that could probably change our society around for the better. And so oftentimes adults think that we have all the answers, but clearly we do not.
Yeah,
But
I
to
appreciate
engage them.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that in,
Yeah.
because that's exactly what one of the projects I work on. That's exactly what I do, is center youth voice.
Yeah.
We compensate them to be in the room. We ask them. They get final authority on the documents that go out.
Awesome.
They get a chance to edit. They get a chance to graphic design it. They get a chance to build it. So absolutely, they have a lot of answers. They are philanthropists, they are researchers, they are educators, and it's about us giving them space to live that out and give them that language to see them as an expert. When we see them or anyone in an underrepresented community as an expert, it really does boost their health outcome, but it also boosts that social and communal outcome as well. And so that's really important.
And you know what, I think too, a lot of times they're kicking against society and the different things that have been placed because they know that it's not right. They know that we need something different.
Yeah.
They can see that it's not working.
That's right.
Oftentimes, adults have problems, but they know that it's something clearly challenging, that they're not going to want to repeat the same cycle. So we have to commend them for that. I love how you said you give them voice.
Absolutely.
Because that voices are so important. And so helpful for us.
In whatever way the voice comes,
Yeah,
too.
yes.
Because that's the other piece.
Yeah.
So I tell my young people, I mean, so sometimes it's a snazzy voice, sometimes it's a shy voice, sometimes it's a rebellious voice.
Yeah.
We just give space to it.
Wow.
And we allow that space to then be the place where they can dream, where they can be upset. And I tell them, you can say anything however you want to me, because this environment is a intended safe space for you. And then I can help you shape it so that they can hear it better in the world. So it's both and. They need a space to be open and say whatever, and then also they need guidance and support. I often say my work with young people is to be the bumper at the bowling alley. And so the bumper at the bowling alley is not to stop you, it's just to give you a slight nudge back into the middle, right? And so I give them a slight nudge back into the middle, and then they go on and they hit all the pins down.
You are truly the person for that.
Yeah,
You
I
are.
enjoy, I mean, out of all the work that I do, and I do a great amount of good work.
Let's talk about that too, with your different hats.
Yeah,
Let's talk
working
about
with
your
young
different
people
hats.
is probably my most exciting because it's I can look in their eyes and see the absolute future. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so promising.
Absolutely.
Because oftentimes you hear just the opposite, but being able to see the future.
Yeah.
Oh, that's powerful.
Yeah, I see beyond the today, which is really exciting. Yeah.
No matter what state they may be in, there's
matter.
still future.
Absolutely.
Because they
Always.
are still growing and developing, right?
Always. Absolutely.
So listen,
Okay.
you work with the youth.
Yes.
You do crisis intervention.
Yes.
You do food security.
Yes.
You help leaders become better in what they're doing. What else do you do? And just kind of share us. That's just only a very few things that I named. But can you share what that looks like?
Yeah.
And if someone wants to get in contact with you
yes.
for the work that you're doing so that you can assist them, can you give that information out as well?
So a couple of current projects, because my brain has to stay sometimes very focused because I can go back, for days. So we're currently working with NDOT, which is our National Department of Transportation, on what's called Vision Zero, and that is it's actually an international campaign to mitigate and eliminate injuries by motor, bicycle, and pedestrian. So we have quite a bit of fatalities and injuries in those three modes, right? So if you think about someone crossing the street, we are, I believe, and this number may have changed a little bit, like number 5 in the world, in the country for pedestrian deaths. That is very high for us to be the it city, right? For us to be, and I always say, who is it for? But that's very high.
That's good.
Yeah, it's very high. So working on that, so I work a lot with the government to make sure that all types of people have access to these really high impact initiatives. Because when you think about, as an example, when tragedy happens, the high injury networks or the high injury places are usually places where Black and brown people reside, because that's usually where the less infrastructure has over years taken place. And so it's really important that that I make sure that everyone gets access to the information, and also that I emphasize making sure that the communities who may not be aware of the support that's available, that they're aware of that. So taking that into the community has been great. I do quite a bit of speaking, as I mentioned before, around diversity, equity, inclusion, anti-racism, justice, all of those letters. I say at the core of my work is humanity, right? How can we treat people better? How can we be a better neighbor to someone else? And that's, I mean, that I weave that in all of my work. I don't care what we're talking about. I'm going to weave in that aspect in all the work. You mentioned already food insecurity, but I'm working on a great project, and you happen to be participating in that. It's a grant that was given to the Healthy Nashville Leadership Council from the Tennessee Department of Health, so that we can do a few things in North Nashville around food insecurity, particularly an environmental scan. We completed that, and so you participated in kind of speaking out about what's happening in the environment. And now we're in the mapping phase. So when you start thinking about making systemic improvements, you got to know who's around.
Yeah.
And so we're doing this store map to figure out what stores are actually around the community that have food. And is it accessible food?
Yeah.
Is it healthy food? Is it culturally accessible food?
Quality.
Is it enough food? Is it quality food, right? And really defining what food looks like too, because food can come in all types of fashions, but is it nutritious food? Is it something that can sustain you? And in particular, making sure that the entire family can eat and the entire community can eat, not just that a parent or a grandparent or an aunt or uncle is negotiating their food for their children.
What does that mean, negotiating? What does that look like in a family?
Yeah, so in a family, what that will look like is I've got rent to pay, or we've got to have bus fare. And so if I've got $5 for bus fare and you need to eat, well, I may can get you something off the dollar menu and still get us around, but I'm not going to eat. So you may get one meal for the day and I get nothing for the day. And so people are often negotiating that, which ultimately negotiates what their health outcome is, which is, it's not just, when we talk about health, it's not going to just be physically what's happening. It's also emotionally and mentally and spiritually, as you mentioned, what is happening. And so to look at your child who has to be in school all day and say you only get one meal, and maybe you get one meal and you have to share it among siblings, that is emotionally overwhelming. And then that stress, and I know you talk about this a good amount, that stress compounds into physical health. So now you have a heart condition because of the amount of stress on you every single day, seeing your child not eat. And so that's why it's a systemic issue, because communally, we got to make sure that our community eats. It can't just be a one-off thing. So we've been doing the mapping, and then we're also working on this training, Seeds of Equity training, that you will be a facilitator on, really taking the story of food insecurity into the community and making sure people really know what it means to be food insecure, but also on the other side, what it means to be food secure.
Good.
How do we not just live in the insecurity, but also figure out what the security looks like? And of course, you're participating in the wonderful work that you all do here, and making sure that not only that you're feeding people, but also educating them on how to feed themselves. See, that goes from just the one individual relationship to now communally.
That's
because
right.
what will happen is someone will be with their niece or nephew or their grandchild and say, hey, let's cook together. So now we're creating intergenerational, we're changing that transmission of trauma, and we're moving into a transmission of joy and building that relationship. And so we have the potential to do that, to really shift from that trauma to absolute joy at the end of all of this.
From trauma to joy.
Absolutely.
From hopelessness to hope.
Absolutely.
And that's what I believe that we have been called to do.
Absolutely.
I am so grateful and so thankful for the amazing work that you continue to do. I know you didn't share all that you do, because that's another segment.
But that's okay. I mean, and you mentioned how people can get in touch. I mean, they can KiaJarman.com, so they can go to the website, and then all the social media platforms. I'm Kia Jarman on those.
Can you spell that? So
Yes,
just in case?
Kia Jarman, KiaJarmon.com, and of course you can find me on all the other platforms as well. But I enjoy communicating with folks, and I enjoy them being a part of the process. I am slower to respond, but part of that is that boundary of slowing us down and not being in a sense of urgency to always be on.
Oh my goodness.
And really, so that's been a model, is modeling that you can slow down, you can pace yourself.
Oh my goodness.
Because it's best for my mental health.
Yes.
But it's also best for me, as I really am a full-time mom to my child, and getting him where he need to get before I got here, and then I'll pick him up from school. So it's like a constant. I only have him so long. So it's my responsibility to get him where he needs to go.
You are a smart mother.
Thank
That
you.
is so good.
Thank you.
Thank you. What would be your final words to our audience on today?
Oh my gosh, just be a better person. You know, and that's a constant. That's this morning at 5 o'clock when I'm asleep, but I hear the trash man outside and I look and I said, oh my gosh, I've forgotten to pull the trash can up. And I see him get out of the truck,
Yes.
which he's done before multiple times. He comes and he gets the trash can and he pulls it to the edge. And I, in pajamas, run to my office, grab a gift card that I had sitting out, and I run outside and I'm waving my hand at 5 o'clock in the morning. And he gets out of the truck. He says, "You don't owe me anything." And I said, "Oh no, you absolutely do something for me that you didn't have to do when you come get, because I forgot again, and I'm so sorry." And so he takes it and he's like, "You don't have to." And I said, "No, please take this." And you know, just that moment just put me in a place where I said, okay, this okay. So then when I'm driving and someone is driving reckless, and they flip me off, I didn't have a response. See, that's how you just get, so you both can happen.
Yes.
Right? But I was on such a beautiful high space from that interaction this morning of just being able to do something. I had been saying, if I can wake up and hear this gentleman outside, I'm going to run out there and give him this. And it just happened to work out beautifully today. And so just work towards being a better human every single day that you can.
I love that. Work towards being a better human.
Yes.
Every day that you can, because every day that we wake up, we see new mercies. God gives us another opportunity. And I think about the passage of scripture that says this is how we can be a better human, right?
Yeah.
To love the Lord thy God with the heart, the mind, and the soul, and love your neighbor as you love yourself. As Miss Kia went to the extra mile to get up to tell the individual, thank you for taking time to get my garbage when we oftentimes forget. And that's being a better human. Thank you so much for joining us. We will see you again on next week. God bless you.